All right, I feel like I'm like 30 years late to this trend, but I've been thinking a lot about how I feel about all the different past console generations and other systems, and I wanted to make a video just kind of ranting a bit about that and ranking them. And what better way to do that than a good old-fashioned tier maker? I'm gonna start with consoles that ranks S through F, including basically everything other than the most recent systems, the Series X and PS5. Now the thing with this is, I'm generally not like a super negative person. I feel like I'm pretty positive with most systems because I like to see things, but we gotta have something in F rank, right? So just keep in mind, a little bit of salt with some of this. There's things that are gonna go in F rank that I still think are perfectly fine systems, but something needs to go to the bottom. All right, I think the way I'm gonna do this, I'm just gonna look through the order they have the consoles in and start putting them in places. I'm probably gonna rearrange some of these as time goes by. 3DS. My gut right away says B. Like, I love the 3DS a lot, and there was a lot of great games that came out later on the system. I feel like it didn't quite live up to the original DS's library, though. It also had a really rough start. The first year on 3DS was not great. I feel like Fire Emblem Awakening was really like the turning point for the system. B feels good to me. I don't want to put it any higher, I think, but I don't think it deserves to go any lower. Atari is weird, because I don't actually have that close of a, I didn't really grow up with an Atari. I have played some Atari games, but it's always been kind of a curiosity of like, oh, I should go back and try this thing. I should see what it's like to play Pitfall. But it's not really a system I have any actual strong attachment to or experience with. So I think for the sake of putting it somewhere, probably F, sorry. It's just, look, historically significant system, not significant to me whatsoever. So, Dreamcast, feeling A, or am I feeling B? Feeling A or B. I like the Dreamcast a lot. Like, the Dreamcast library had some really awesome titles on it, and the concept of the VMU for its time, while it was definitely rough around the edges, I thought was the absolute coolest thing. I also just love it aesthetically. Like, the Dreamcast is one of my favorite consoles visually. I mean, even I have the PS1 here, which is kind of rocking a similar vibe. And so that's just a look I really love. I feel like it's an A. I might drop it to B later, but we're gonna leave it an A for now. Okay, DS. I mean, obviously I gotta put this above 3DS because I just said a bit ago how I don't think the 3DS lived up to the DS as much. I'm gonna put that in A. It was a huge deal of a system for its time. The dual screen setup, the touch interface, some of my really favorite gameplay experiences were on the DS because it did things that you can't really do on other systems. I mean, one thing that I've always ranted about time and time again is how much I loved the original version of World Ends With You, and I don't think later ports and remakes of it really tapped into the same gameplay experience because how frantic the dual screen situation was, you just can't capture elsewhere. So yeah, that's a legendary system. I feel like a lot of the S through B ranks are going to be handhelds. Like, I don't think I'm putting any handhelds in the lower end. We'll see. That might change. Okay, so we have a GBA SP. Is GBA separate on here? No, it's just SP on its own. S tier. S tier, absolutely. Look, while I have a lot of love for some games that were on like the N64 and the GameCube, during those years, the GBA was where the vast majority of my Nintendo time went. I love the GBA library so much. That's the system where, at least in the West, we got our introduction to Fire Emblem, we got the Golden Sun games. There were just a lot of great RPGs that thrived on the GBA that I don't think were really on a lot of Nintendo consoles at the time. Also, tons of great platformers that had that SNES era vibe. For instance, Castlevania Aria Sorrow, probably my absolute favorite Castlevania game there is, lives on the GBA. The library on that system is so damn good. Tactics games too, like Final Fantasy Tactics, there was a Tactics Ogre game in GBA, yeah, that's S tier, easy. I don't need to keep ranting about that. Original Game Boy. Okay, I feel like original Game Boy is rough because it was a really nostalgic one for me, and I grew up having a Game Boy and loved a lot of the older library. I mean, obviously there's some big stuff on there. Tetris, Pokemon, but when I really go back and look at the games that I ended up playing a lot more and am attached to, it's not really that large of a library. Like, I think it was a big deal for its time, but as far as the stuff that resonated with me, I mean, I put a lot of time into Mario and Mega Man games that were on the Game Boy. Pokemon was definitely the biggest thing eventually. I can't put it lower than C. Like, C would be the lowest I would go on that. I kind of feel maybe B along with... See, and this is why I'm bad at like picking favorite things, because I'm putting so much stuff already. Like, D and E is empty. We just have Atari by itself at F so far. I'm gonna put original Game Boy in C for now. Again, important console historically, but when I just look back at what I really enjoy playing on it, there's just not as much stuff, especially with how much the GBA library just hit perfectly for me. GameCube. Okay, so GameCube is a weird one for me because I feel like I want to rank it higher because of how much I love the controller. So I feel like I should just like ignore that and focus more on just the system and the library itself, which I like GameCube a lot. It's probably not the strongest overall library for me. It's definitely during that period where Nintendo lost a lot of third-party support that started on the N64 and continued on to the GameCube. There are some absolute banger titles on there that I love. I mean, Resident Evil 4 released on there first before it became a multi-platform game. We got Wind Waker and Twilight Princess on it, which were good Zelda games. There was some good first-party stuff on there. There just wasn't a lot of third-party that I was in love with, aside from maybe like the Skies of Arcadia port that ended up happening. C? This is another one where I'm like C or B. I gotta add something to D eventually. This is gonna be a problem. Something has to go there. I have to fill the gaps. All right, I'm gonna leave it in D for now. That feels a little wrong. I think I'm gonna bump to C later, but we'll see how the rest of this fills out. I feel like I need to balance it out. Game Boy Color. That's a weird one because it's kind of a half system. Like, we didn't really look at generations that way yet at the time, but it's almost like how we had like the Pro systems, or maybe with the DS going to the DSi. Like, it's 80-90% the same thing as the Game Boy, but upping the color options did allow for some new games that looked really interesting and giving fresh life to some games that were on the Game Boy. But it wasn't really like a new system. That said, I absolutely love the Atomic Purple color, so that's probably gonna balance it out a little. I'm gonna put it side by side with the original Game Boy, because I feel like functionally, just, at least in my mind, it's the same overall thing. Genesis. Okay, so here's the thing. I grew up in a Nintendo household. I actually never had my own Sega Genesis until way later when we got one as part of just, you know, doing stuff on this channel. And so while there are some Sega Genesis games that I've experienced, because like I would play stuff at friends' houses, or, you know, obviously I've gone back to play some classics where I'm like, oh, I'm really curious, I always heard good things about this game, I'm gonna check it out. It's not one I really feel a strong connection to, and so I'm probably gonna tick off a lot of people with this, but I'm feeling D on this one. I don't know, I just don't have that strong connection. There are some good games on there though, I know, like, God, there's some beat 'em ups on there that I really love. Obviously Streets of Rage, Golden Axe, classic Sonic games. It all came to me later. I don't know, it just doesn't feel as strong to me. Blame my parents, which systems they bought. All right, N64. This is where I have to make a decision here, because I feel like there's this weird debate that goes on with some people about which one was better, the N64 or the GameCube. And I've never felt like I've had a very strong stance in either one, because both of them have some really great specific games, but they were also both during this lull where like Nintendo was really relying a lot more on first party and just didn't have a lot of third-party support yet, right? Like the SNES had a ton and they lost it all to other companies later on for various reasons. And so N64, some good stuff on there. Obviously Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, two of the best Zelda games that there are. Star Fox 64, the best Star Fox game that has been made. But do I think it's more than the GameCube? I feel like in my mind, one of these goes in C and one goes in D, and I might need to swap them. Because GameCube felt weird to me in C or D. I'm putting GameCube in C. And N64 is going down to D. That's what we're doing here. I don't like the N64 controller. I was never a huge fan. There was some really cool stuff that the system did for advancing technology and introducing a lot of things like 3D Mario and that kind of stuff, but I just, there wasn't enough on there library-wise for me to rank it higher. The original NES, I think, oh God, our C is gonna get so full. I feel like that's a C again for me. There's, again, awesome stuff on there, and I'm trying not to let that counterbalance, you know, other stuff I don't care about. It's also, again, just time and place. It was the first major Nintendo system, not counting when they're doing like the Game & Watches and stuff. And so it's one of the situations where, again, it's like historically important, and I get it, but when I think in terms of what I personally really enjoy playing and want to go back and do, there's absolutely some stuff in that catalog, but it's not the largest. It's like C or D for me, I think. Man, for how much stuff I do on Nintendo, a lot of them are ranking in the middle and low right now. We got GBA in the top, so I'm showing respect to the brand. Vita, I love the Vita. I wish Sony supported it more. The games that got ported and re-released on the Vita, and part of what's messed up about it too is that part of the reason why I love that system so much isn't even because of its own library, but because it gave me a way to digitally do a lot of the PS1 catalog, along with a lot of the games that I loved on the PSP. And so while I liked the Vita itself, it really was more my PSP, PS1 machine that just had a much prettier display. So is this adding to the pile of C? It might add to the pile of C. C is currently the most, I mean, it's the middle, right? It should be the most dense, I think. The original PlayStation. I love the original PlayStation so much. That's immediately A or S tier. I think the only reason why I might not put it in S tier is because I probably want to put the PS2 in S tier, because it played all the stuff the PS1 played on top of its own library. The PlayStation 1 was just, yeah, again, going in terms of this kind of stuff I'm into and the games that really resonated with me, RPGs are definitely one of the biggest genres for me. Japanese RPGs, especially during like the SNES and PlayStation era, and then PS1 had so much good stuff. I mean, that's where you get that kind of little PlayStation trilogy of Final Fantasy games with 7, 8, and 9, Legend of Dragoon, Chrono Cross. Way too many games for me to actually even list, like the more I think about it. Breath of Fire 3 and 4, Secret of Mana, just so many incredible games that I would think was, for me at least, there's this stretch of titles from SNES to PlayStation 1 that are so incredible, and yeah, I gotta put it, it's at least A tier. I might bump it to S, I don't know, we'll talk. PS2, S tier. This isn't, I think, a surprise to anyone really. There's a reason that historically it's, you know, the top selling system of all time, which might change in the next couple years, but as of right now, it still holds that top spot, and for damn good reason. It was an incredible system. I mean, just the breadth of titles on that library. Again, RPGs are always a big thing for me, and there was a lot of great stuff to enjoy on there for that system. But on top of that, it's where you had the run of some of the really strong Metal Gear Solid titles, 2 and 3, incredible games. Horror games were really thriving. We had that port of Resident Evil 4 on the system, along with Silent Hill 2 and 3. There's just this cross-section of genres that I really enjoy, and I think all of them had just great representation on the system. It's just a legendary king. It's got to be at the top. I got to put it in S. PS3. Okay, this is where I maybe get a little controversial. I've been talking with some people about this, and look, again, I enjoy all the systems on here, but if I got to put something at the bottom, I don't really care about that generation of systems. Like PS3, 360, all of them are going to be ranking a little lower on here. It was just an era in gaming that I don't really look back on as fondly. There's individual games that I really like, but there's just a lot of trend stuff and directions on those systems that I am not a big fan of. And so that really keeps me from putting them any higher. I feel like we immediately improved on a lot of those systems with the generation after. And while there was some cool stuff like graphical leaps that happened during them, I feel like the quality of libraries was actually a step down from the previous generation. So with that said, PS3, it's going in D. And I think I'm going to shift some of these other ones as a result to help represent that, because I do, like, it's low. It's not super low, but it's low. I'm gonna go ahead and move the N64 down to E. A lot of stuff I loved on it, but if I'm being honest with myself, in terms of just the overall experience, not one of my favorite overall libraries. PS4. PS4 is gonna go up there. It's minimum B. It's B or A. There were a lot of franchises that kind of stopped being represented starting with the PS4 that either lived entirely on the PS3 or had some representation going into it, and then they kind of almost started fresh with a lot of stuff. We got soft reboots of some series with like God of War. We didn't really see any new entries for some other ones, like with Resistance. I almost want to leave it in B just because separating this kind of hierarchy between the PS2, the PS1, and the PS4 in my own brain. There's some good stuff though. I'm gonna put it in A. Genesis, you're also getting demoted to E, mostly because I just don't know you that well. I'm sorry. PSP. PSP is going up high. I'm gonna put it in B. I'm putting it above the PS Vita because, again, part of the reason I love the Vita is that it just gave me a better display to play my PSP games on. And when I just look back at a lot of the library, there was such great RPG representation on that system between the ports and remakes for Tactics Ogre and Final Fantasy Tactics War of the Lions. There were some really good PSP remakes of some games, arguably the definitive version of 4 before we got 4 Pixel Remaster. It's weird because the 4 on PSP has all the bonus content they added from games over time, and then 4 Pixel Remaster got rid of all those things. I don't know, the PSP was just such a great launching point for PlayStation in handhelds, and they just didn't keep it up. for whatever reason. You know, again, I love the Vita, but it just didn't get the long-term support it needed, and that's why it ends up ranking a little lower, because I love the potential of it, and it just didn't get actioned on quite as much as I really wanted in its full life. I feel like PSP was the one that was fully realized. Like, they really gave it the support. We actually had a lot of great games to release over time, lots of solid ports, re-releases, that kind of stuff, and we just didn't see it after from them for whatever reason. Okay, Saturn. Saturn's another weird one, because like I said, I grew up in a Nintendo household. We never had a Saturn. I actually have yet to pick up a Saturn because I don't know if you've looked at retro collecting, but when it comes to systems, Saturn is one of the most expensive ones to get into. Both getting the system itself that's operational and getting the games. And so this is another one where it's really kind of a non-one for me. At the same time, I feel like I vibe a lot with the Saturn. Like, I feel like I should have actually started collecting on it sooner when it was a little more affordable, because a lot of the games that I've seen on there that I haven't had the chance to play firsthand have looked really cool to me. I like the physical design of the system. Dreamcast is still #1 for Sega in my mind. I'm gonna put it in it's going in this kind of pity section above Atari, where it's like in the E's. I wish I knew more about it. I wish I had more experience with it. It's probably better to put it. SNES, S tier. SNES is probably my favorite. It's definitely my favorite retro system from Nintendo. Again, SNES through PlayStation 1, golden era of RPGs. Chrono Trigger, favorite game of all time, is on there. We've got Final Fantasies 4, 5, and 6. I mean, we never got 5 in the West on the SNES, but I'm counting it. Mega Man X, one of my favorite platformers of all time. Super Mario World, one of the best Mario games. It's just the pinnacle of that era for me. Like, I'm a little biased because I grew up on it, but I think it belongs there. I'm putting it in S. Switch. We're gonna have to have 2 S's in a row here, folks. Look, I love the Switch. I mean, obviously, like, a large part of, like, my channels existed before the Switch, but Switch was really the thing that helped me, like, make videos more often, get very excited about, because I freaking love that system so much. There's just the representation, both in terms of its first-party games, the amount of ported content we got on it. There's things about it that frustrate me a little bit. You know, obviously, you've been watching my videos. I wish there was a better handling of the retro catalog, where instead of just being the membership and subscription, you could get some games individually. But even all that just noise out of the way, if we're just talking in terms of the overall library it's built, and what I think it's also done for helping revive some franchises and just get a lot more energy in Nintendo first parties, it's #1. It's just, I gotta put it in S. Wii U. Okay, look, I feel like I'm gonna put this a lot higher than anyone thinks it has the right to be. I really loved the Wii U, like, in concept. Like, this is another one where its potential didn't get realized, and I'm still a little salty about it. It wasn't marketed the right way, and it absolutely had some problems as far as, like, how slow the UI experience was, and there was a lot of experimental stuff that just didn't work out. But the concept of the dual screen setup, where you have the personal tablet showing its own stuff, and it offered this degree of asymmetric, like, party game kind of stuff going on, I thought was so freaking cool. And there was, like, 3 games that made use of it in an actual interesting way. And Nintendo Land is still one of my favorite party game situations, and you can't do that on any current system right now. It's something that's truly unique to the Wii U, and part of what I love about it. But obviously, it didn't really have a whole lot else going on. I mean, they had other great first-party games that came out, awesome first-party library. Basically, all of it's on the Switch now. I think I'm gonna put it. Is it as high as B? I might put it in B. I don't know. That's not fair. It's in this middle region somewhere. It's not at the bottom. It's not at the top. I think I'm going to go D. I want to love it more than it probably ends up deserving, but it just, such a good first-party library, and all of it's left now and gone to the Switch anyways. The Wii. Wii I have a lot of mixed feelings on. This is an era where Nintendo kind of has a bit of a strong comeback after the N64 and GameCube, but it's mostly just their own first-party titles and, like, the novelty of motion stuff that was really fun, and a lot of the other catalog was a mess. I mean, this is just peak shovelware season for Nintendo. There were so many random games that released on the Wii that I just do not care about. But there's some great first-party stuff too, though. It's also this weird era. I don't know if you guys remember this. There was a time, especially with the Wii, where you would have these multi-platform games come out, and you'd have, like, the 360 version, the PS3 version, the Wii version, the PC version. You'd even have, like, a handheld version, and they would be all titled the same game, but it was like 4 different games. And the Wii version would be noticeably not nearly as good as the ones that you would get on, like, 360 and PS3. Happened a lot with, like, tie-in games. Marvel Ultimate Alliance was, like, a good example of this. Anyways, yeah, the Wii, It's a very conflicting system for me. I'm gonna put it in C. I almost want to put it in D and put Wii U above it because I actually like the potential of the Wii U more, but the Wii did have a lot of other good stuff. I mean, Wii Bowling alone gets so many bonus points. And WarioWare smooth moves. Fantastic motion games that were first party. It's just, there was a whole lot of other crap on there that I did not care about. Xbox One, okay. Xbox One is a weird one because it had such a bad start.
TV experience. TV, 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 TV. Sports TV, TV, TV.
Just a really bad start. And I feel like it put a lot of work in its later years. When you get to like the Xbox One S and the Xbox One X, there's a lot of improvements that happened there, and I think made for a better experience on that system, especially when it came to, playing third-party games and when we were embracing things like the leap to 4K and everything. There was great stuff going on there, but the launch of the Xbox One was so painful. The required Kinect inclusion, the back and forth on how they were handling digital rights stuff. It's just, I like how the system ended, but man, did it take a lot to grow there. And I feel like at this point, the Series X just embodies what Xbox One basically should have been. So I feel like I can't put this one very high. I'm gonna put it in D. It gets bonus points for how it handled its like end season, but I gotta weigh it for its lifetime, and the beginning was not good. Xbox 360. Similar to what I was saying with like the Wii and the PS3, I just don't really like that overall era in home console game systems. Like, there's some great stuff that released on there, but there was a lot of other stuff that I just was a lot more mixed on. That said, during that gen, 360 was probably my main system. I think PS3 took over in the later years, but I picked up the 360 first, partially because it also released first and it was cheaper, much more affordable. And so I put a lot of time on 360 during those years. It's also, I give a lot of credit to 360 for the indie movement that happened for home console at least, because PC gaming, indie games were able to kind of release in whatever way they wanted. There was a way to do freeware releases. On consoles, there weren't a lot of options for that. And so the arcade on 360 really put a lot of work into bringing smaller titles to people. Some of my favorite games, Bastion was originally on the 360 exclusively, Castle Crashers, lots of amazing smaller experimental titles you weren't really seeing. Even if they were multi-platform, I feel like they had a heavier push on 360. So I think it's gonna be the top of me for that gen. I might put it in C alongside, does it go in B? I think it goes in B. It is, I think, a peak for Xbox, and I think there was a lot of really cool stuff it did for its time. I have like a little salt in my system for that overall generation. And then last but not least, the original Xbox. This is actually not last because we still gotta talk about PS5 and Series X. But original Xbox, I'm gonna rank up, I think that goes in C for me. I think that gives us a nice little median top of C right here. Fantastic games on the system. I think it was still figuring itself out. It was a little too late to its generation and also ended up a little early because they put the 360 out before any other systems back in 2005. So it was very short-lived, but there was some great games on there. Knights of the Old Republic, Jade Empire. I mean, this was when BioWare was really blowing up outside of PC games. It's when we got a console version of Morrowind. That was my introduction to that franchise and absolutely fell in love with it. Do I want to put it higher? I want to put it higher, actually. Do I put it in B? Does it sit alongside the 360? I might put it in B. It didn't have, I think, time to grow a truly large library for itself, but it's because it came out so late, and then 360 just immediately leapt off of it. There's definitely some controversial stuff on here. I'm so sorry to Sega people. I put the Dreamcast up high because that is actually the one Sega system I put a lot of time into and loved. I just didn't grow up with Genesis and Saturn. So it's going low. I think I'm overall pretty happy with this. I think if I sat, like, here's the thing, I'm also really indecisive with this kind of stuff. And so I feel like if I sat here for another 30 minutes, I'd probably rearrange a bunch of it and maybe find something I'm a little happier with. But just right now, I think this is right for me. Definitely gonna have some people angry in the comments about some of these choices, but I'm being true to myself. Now, not listed in this tier maker is Series X and PS5. I kind of don't want to rank those because I feel like we're now actually beginning to really see these consoles have their stride. They've been out for 3 years and it's been kind of a slow generation, especially relative to past years. A lot of good reasons for that with, just 2020, everything after that. I feel like they would both rank fairly high though. I'm really happy with, even though their actual individual, like, exclusive titles right now are few and far between, I like the direction they've gone with a lot of their software updates. I love the DualSense on the PS5. I think there's a lot of potential in these systems, and I feel like once we look at them in retrospect later, they're going to be pretty high in this list for me, probably in like the A or B section. I don't know about S rank just yet. I just don't think they're really properly rankable yet because it just hadn't had enough time yet. This is where I'm at on consoles. Fight me in the comments, I'm sure you want to.